class, today we're going to be talking about food chains. So an organism is going to need energy in order to survive. Their role is determined by how it interacts with those living or abiotic and biotic factors in its ecosystem. So their role is either going to be that of a producer, a consumer, or a decomposer. So a producer is an organism that makes its own food. So this is going to be including all of your plants. The energy is going to enter your ecosystem as sunlight. Plants are going to capture that sunlight and store it as food energy through photosynthesis. And producers are the source of all of the food in an ecosystem. So every single food chain ever is going to start with a plant. Consumers are organisms that obtain energy by feeding on another organism. So these consumers cannot make their own food. For example, humans cannot stand there in the sunlight and produce their own food. Those organisms are going to depend on your producers for food and energy, whether they are eating another animal or another plant. Consumers are named based on what they eat. So herbivores eat only plants. Some examples of these would be caterpillars, cattle, and deer. They might eat parts of the plants that might include the seeds or the roots or even the bark or their pollen, the leaves, the fruits. It depends on the animal. Carnivores eat only other animals. For example, lions and spiders and snakes. These are going to include insects and all other animals. So a lot of felines, lions, tigers, all cats, birds of prey like eagles and hawks, sharks, and frogs. So even if an animal is a carnivore, they can't survive without plants. Why? Because that energy comes from the sun, and without those plants producing that energy, then we're not going to have anything to start off with. So if those carnivores are eating other animals, those animals were probably herbivores eating plants, and their energy came from the sun. So they still need that beginning part of the food chain to go on for them to survive. Omnivores actually eat both plants and animals. This is going to include crows, foxes, goats. Most humans, unless they are identified as like a vegetarian or a vegan, are considered omnivores because they eat both foods with plants and animals. Other examples, most bears, raccoons, a lot of primates, some seagulls and other birds are all considered omnivores. Decomposers are the next group. These are going to break down waste and dead organisms, and they actually end up recycling those materials to the environment. So they're very important because without them, we would have piles and piles of dead plants and animals just all over the place. The two main groups of this would include bacteria and fungi like molds and mushrooms. So here are some examples of them. They're going to consume or eat those dead plants and animals, and they're going to reduce them to simpler forms of matter. So remember we talked about in chemistry, matter can't be created or destroyed. If you have dead organisms, the fungi and the bacteria are going to recycle those nutrients and start the cycle all over again. So the important thing to know is that energy is going to enter the ecosystem as sunlight. It's converted into food by producers. And then that energy is transferred to each organism that eats a producer. So we all know that we eat to get energy. That all starts with the producers, with the sunlight. So the energy is then transferred to other organisms that feed on these consumers. That movement of energy through your ecosystem is going to be shown in a diagram. So we've talked about food chains. There are also what we call food webs. Okay, so food chain is going to be a series of events in which one organism eats another and obtains energy. For example, we've got some sea kelp here. It's a producer, gets light from, energy from the sun. The seal is going to eat the kelp, and then the killer whale or orca whale is going to eat the seal to get their energy. So the first organism in the food chain is always, always, always a producer because they're starting with that energy from the sun. The second organism that eats the plant is a consumer, and they're going to be called a first-level consumer. So if you're eating plants, they're always going to be an herbivore, a first-level consumer. After that, we're going to be considered a second-level consumer. They eat the first-level consumer. So if we have an organism that's eating a second-level consumer, they would be considered a third-level consumer. When you draw a food chain, the arrow is going to point from the organism that's being eaten to the organism doing the eating. So that direction of the arrow is showing the flow of energy. It means is eaten by. So for example, if you have a leaf, that's our producer. A leaf to arrow means the leaf is eaten by the caterpillar. So that caterpillar, again, is going to be an herbivore. They're going to be a first-level consumer. And then our next set of notes, we're going to talk about food webs. So what happens when organisms don't eat the same thing for every meal every single day?